Alright guys, I want to start off this video by asking a really important question. What is wrong with Lucasfilm's story group? What is the issue with the people who are part of developing the canon of Star Wars in between films? Do they not know how to tell stories? I have to believe they don't. Now, a couple weeks ago, I posted a video about how we now have the canon explanation of what happens to Luke's hand after Empire Strikes Back. That is usually an important topic and a big question that people had, and even though that was answered in Legends, they do have a new explanation for it in canon. If you haven't seen that video, you should check it out before you watch this one. But essentially, it is very similar to Legends with its own twist, and you find out Palpatine was using Luke's hand to clone Snoke. Maybe it was just purely Luke's DNA, or it was Luke's DNA and Palpatine's DNA. We don't really have too much details about it. It is just assumed Palpatine was using Luke's hand for Snoke. Now, in the most recent issue of the Vader series, we see Vader looking at Luke's hand, finding out about Snoke, and he continues to explore the halls of Exegul, the exact same area Kylo Ren was in Rise of Skywwalker at the beginning of the movie. As he's walking around the halls of Exegul, he hears Palpatine's voice in the background, and they're basically talking to one another. And keep in mind, this is in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So he's starting to grow a little bit more of a backbone towards the Emperor. And even though Vader knows that he wouldn't be able to defeat him one-on-one, Vader is just sick of it. He's sick of the lies, the secrecy, the power that Palpatine holds over him. Now, I also mentioned in that recent video that Vader was being hunted down by Ochi of Bestoon, which is the bounty hunter who took Rey away and hid her on Jakku in 7, 8, and 9. Now, Vader defeated Ochi and took him as a prisoner, and as Vader roams the halls of this Exegul temple, he has Ochi alongside him, and Ochi is also giving him some sort of details on this base they're currently in. Now, I'm gonna pause the story, and I'm just gonna say, for those who have been watching me, and when I talk about Star Wars, and when the sequel trilogy is somewhat mentioned in the topic, you know I don't like the sequel trilogy. In fact, I might even hate them, especially Episode 8. The sequel trilogy was not well done. There is a lot of issues to them, and I will also remind everyone that if you do like the sequel trilogy, all the power to you. I just don't. I know it wasn't part of George Lucas's plan, and Star Wars is George Lucas is Star Wars, and to see what they turned his legacy into is a disgrace to me. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that is because this obviously has something to do with the sequel trilogy, and what could it possibly have to do? What story could they tell that they need to find a way to bridge the prequels and the original trilogy over to the sequel trilogy? And, you know, should I be surprised? No. No, I shouldn't. Should anyone be surprised? No. No, we should not be surprised that they want to bridge the gap between the sequels and the original trilogy. Now, the issue with bridging that gap is there's not just one bridge to gap, there's a multitude of gaps to bridge. And there are so many bridges that you need to fill in throughout the history of the OT to the sequel trilogy. And there's just so much lackluster story, and even story that simply makes no sense in 7, 8, 9, that I don't know how many bridges you could fill in from the OT to the sequels. I think a lot of us fans today actually just want Star Wars to move away from the sequel trilogy. It's okay to have a couple callbacks to it, or maybe a little reference or Easter eggs, but to directly tie things in, it's just too difficult. It's a mess. Now, this is a comic book, and we all know in Star Wars that yeah, it's canon, but at the end of the day, what you see on screen is what is canon. So animation, TV shows, movies, even video games, that's canon content. You can write books and stories and comic books that fit in within the canon, but if someone decides to make a movie based around that comic or book they just wrote, or maybe elements from those stories, then that new movie or show or piece of medium on screen will become the new canon. And that piece of literature that was just written is no longer canon anymore. So we're taking this specific story from a Vader comic book, and I think why it's important is because Darth Vader is in the title of this comic. And without wasting any more time and without dragging it on too long, what is happening here is when Vader walks around Exegul, he ends up finding hundreds of Star Destroyers. And anyone normal would think that Emperor Palpatine is just, you know, he's building more of his Empire fleet on Exegul, and when they're all ready, he'll ship them out into the wider known galaxy. And really, that's what the story should be, but of course, Episode 9 ruins a lot of what Episode 6 is all about. And in Episode 9, what do we see? Well, we see a bunch of Star Destroyers with the underbelly weapon of a Death Star. So you don't need the Death Star anymore because you have thousands of Star Destroyer ships that have Death Star weaponry, and with one blast they can destroy a planet. So what was the point of the Death Star? Where it gets even worse is they're not just regular Star Destroyers being made in this comic book series. No, Vader in fact finds a bunch of Star Destroyers with the underbelly weapon of a Death Star. So he essentially finds the Death Star Star Destroyers from Episode 9 being created between 5 and 6. That just doesn't make sense. Am I the only one who... we all think this doesn't make sense, correct? Let me read you some dialogue from 2 of these panels. So Palpatine says, "A fleet of Star Destroyers 1,000 times more powerful than the galaxy has ever seen." Vader says, "Is this all you have?" And then the next panel, Vader says, "More monsters, more machines." And then Ochi pipes in and says, these aren't just machines. Each will carry a cannon that can destroy a planet. And there are hundreds of them. And obviously by the time Rise of Skywalker comes around, there's thousands of them. So why this bothers me so much and just makes no sense to me is because when you watch Return of the Jedi, Palpatine was arrogant and cocky, and he already knew he was going to win. When Luke turned himself into the Emperor and tried to turn his father back into Anakin Skywalker so they could defeat the Emperor together, Palpatine was so full of it that he said, well, it's never gonna happen. He's essentially saying it's never going to happen. If you don't join me, all your friends will die. The rebellion will be destroyed. When you watch Episode 6, you know for a fact Palpatine never had this going on. That's the problem with creating a new canon. How are you gonna fit 6 into 9? How are you gonna fit 5 into 8? And so on, so on. This is the issue with it. When I watch 6 now, am I to think, oh, you know, Palpatine doesn't really care if he loses. He's got this fleet of planet-killing machines. So then that leads me to my next thing. If that was the case, if he already had hundreds of these, why did he ship them out in the last battle over Endor? Why was he wasting his time building a Death Star 2 when he already had hundreds of these planet-killing Star Destroyers? What if you told me Palpatine in 6 knew he was going to die and the Death Star was going to get destroyed and he knew his plan was going to fail in 6, so then he took the next 30 years to figure out his cloning process and build thousands of more Death Star Star Destroyers? Well, why? Why do that? Why? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. The guy could have simply been like, oh no, the Star Destroyer's dead. You blew up the Star Destroyer. Guess what? I have like 1,000 mini versions of that can do the exact same damage the Death Star can. Bro, Palpatine in number 6 could have issued an order to some of these Star Destroyers to fly around the galaxy and destroy every rebel-owned planet there was. It was that easy. So my rant is not because I don't like this story, and I don't. I don't at all. But it's not just because I don't like the story. It's because they're creating something that happened in the history of Star Wars that doesn't make sense. Because essentially, if this is real, Palpatine never loses in episode 6. It's painful to even try to make sense of it, because it doesn't. I must sound like a big baby, but I don't care. Wah, wah, wah. Because now it's like when Anakin killed the Emperor at the end of 6, Vader sees in Exegul, like, oh, okay, he's cloning. So he's figured out a clone. Cool, okay, nice. Oh, and he's got thousands of Death Star Star Destroyers. Sure, cool. I just don't understand how, I don't like it. Sorry, it really bugs me. Really bothers me. Yep, it does. But you know, overall, Lucasfilm storyboard group, whoever's leading these specific comic book or novel projects, do better. But anyways, that is it for today. And for any of you new viewers, if you do like my content or if you have liked what you've seen, do consider subscribing. And everyone, please leave a like. It does help out a lot. And for anyone out there who does like me talking about Star Wars or wants to see more of my Star Wars content, I do have a Star Wars playlist that I will link below into the description so you can check out all I've got there. But just like every Star Wars video on this channel has to end.
May the Force be with you.